this.
So first off, thanks for buying the RetroPie image for your Raspberry Pi. If you're getting this video, you should already have your SD card, or it should be on its way. Once you get it, just pop it into your Raspberry Pi and power it on. So the screen that we're at now is the screen that you'll see when you pop it in for the very first time and you let it boot up. Be sure to already have your controller plugged in, and all we're going to do is follow the on-screen directions. So it says hold the A button on your device to configure it. I have a Xbox 360 controller, so I'm going to hold down the A button, and you'll see that it came up and said that it was an Xbox 360. So now you're just going to walk through and just do what it says. So we'll start off with the D-pad, press up, then press down, left, right, start. So this will start you up in Emulation Station. So all games and systems are playable through here. You can just use your D-pad to go left or right to go through all of them. If you want to pick a system, just hit A. Then you'll have a list of all the games along with some artwork. If you want to launch a game, just hit A. And then you will just play the game like you normally would. We'll go through its start. So in order to exit out of the game, you hit select and then start. That will bring you back to the main, well, it'll bring you back to like where you were at. And you can just hit B again, go back to the main screen. So while you're in Emulation Station, if you hit start, it will bring up a main menu where you can do some system changes and stuff like that. Just hit B to get out of that. When you're in a system menu, you can hit select, and it'll bring up an options menu. And from here, you can sort by letter. You can change the letter. It makes it easier to go through and look for specific games. You can also go through and edit metadata for the games and stuff like that. Hit B to back out of that. First thing we're going to want to do is to go into the RetroPie settings. Just hit A to select that. And we are going to go down to Wi-Fi. So you select that by hitting A, and this is where you can go through and set up your Wi-Fi. You're going to need a keyboard to do this. So if you want to connect your Wi-Fi, you're going to need to hook up a USB keyboard where you can enter in the key. But we're just going to exit out. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is go to the RetroPie setup. Click A. And we are going to want to tab down to where it says Configuration Tools. Hit A again. And we are going to tab down to Emulation Station. Click OK, hit A. And we need to select the very first one. to clear the configuration controls. So go ahead and hit OK again. Hey. And it's just going to tell you, it's just giving you a message telling you that we're going to clear the controls configurations. Go ahead and hit OK. Now hit cancel. And we want to back out. And go down to perform reboot. All right. So now that we rebooted, it came back to the controller configuration screen. Even though we already set up our controller, it's always good to go through and clear it out and map it again. Sometimes it doesn't take, or you might have some problems. It's always a good idea to go through and do it again. So we will go through and set ours up again. All right, so now that we have our controller configured and you already set up your Wi-Fi, if you want to set up your Wi-Fi, we are ready to go into Emulation Station. So we need to tab over to RetroPie Setup again. Click A, and we are going to go down to Option, Restart in Attract Mode. And what this will do is reboot the Pi, and it will restart in Attract Mode, and also set up the boot. So every time you power off or power on, it will go back into Attract Mode. And when we're in Attract Mode, if you want to switch back to Emulation Station, you can do that too. I'll show you how to do that. So we'll click on Restart in Attract Mode, and it's going to go through and restart. So now we're in Attract Mode, and we're at the system selection screen, which is the main screen. So we'll use the same control setup as we use in Emulation Station. Use the D-pad to navigate through the systems. And you'll use A to select and B to back out. So if you want to tab up to Neo Geo, hit A. Now we're in the game selection screen. So you can just use your controller to navigate. And we can press B to back out. So not only is there a tab for every system, there's a couple collections that are set up. There is a cave and CP 1 through 3 that have specific games set up for them. All right, so any changes that we want to make in Attract Mode, you can go here. It's the Attract Mode setup. You'll see above it that there's an exit. If you click on that and select yes, it will take you out to a command prompt. So unless you want to do something from the command line, you don't ever need to really click on that. So we'll click on Attract Mode setup. All right, so now we are in the Attract Mode setup, and this is also how you access Kodi. Just go ahead and hit A to select it, and Kodi will load up. I'll just quickly show you what Kodi looks like and how to navigate it. All right, so now we are in Kodi, and as you see, it already has the add-ons, and it's set up so you can just use your controller to browse through the selections. And everything in Kodi is configurable and customizable, so you can change the skins, the layout. I mean, you can pretty much do anything that you want to do. So if you want to make any changes, you need to tab over to System and select it. This is where you can configure your controller, you can change the skin, the layout, all the different things that you want to do. So we want to go down to System. Click A. And go down to Input. Tab over. And this is where you can set up your controller. As you can see, my Xbox 360 is already set up. If your controller isn't set up, you go down to where it says Configure Attached Controllers, and it will walk you through setting up your controller. Pretty similar to what we already did when we initially set up the controller. But you can just go through and do that. You can also use a keyboard, and you will need to use a keyboard if you want to go through and set up any additional add-ons. But just right now, you can, once you get your controller set up, you can pretty much navigate and do everything that you want to do within Kodi with just your controller. You can also get an app for your iPhone or your Android phone and use that to control Kodi, and it's really easy and it works really well. All right, so in order to exit Kodi, we just want to tab over to the very far right. Once you tab all the way over to the power button, hit A and select exit. It may take a minute or two to exit out of Kodi. Kodi's pretty CPU intensive, so depending on what you're doing or what you're using it for, it could run a little slow, but I mean overall it works as well as it does on a lot of other things. So also while you're in Attract Mode setup, you can we'll browse through, you can shut down, reboot, you can pretty much do everything that you did in Emulation Station, like configuration wise, like on this menu, but it's a little better to do it through Emulation Station, because sometimes if you change settings or do too much in Attract Mode, some of the settings don't stick or it can cause some issues. So I try to like set up the controller and do all that stuff in Emulation Station and don't really do too much through Attract Mode, but you can if you want. And if you want to go back to Emulation Station, you select this option and it will change the boot back to Emulation Station. But you have all your options here. All right, we'll back out. Let's go. So there's a couple other controls I want to show you. Let's go up to Arcade Classics is where all the MAME and Final Burn Alpha games are. So the current layout for controls, you can also skip letters. So the way that I have it set up now, for if you're using a controller that's got thumbsticks, like the Xbox 360, it's got two. If you push on the left one, it goes back a letter. And if you push on the right, it goes forward a letter. So it makes it a little easier to navigate, especially within the Arcade Classics, which is all the MAME games, because there's almost 3,000 games, so it makes it a little easier to navigate. back and forth. So let's back out. We'll just go through. You can see all the systems. All right, let's go in CP2. So to select the game, you hit A. As the game is loading up, you can hit A, and it will bring up the emulator settings menu. From here, if you have a game that doesn't start up automatically, or it's running kind of funky or doesn't look right, you can go through here and modify the settings. The first option, you don't ever want to change, because what it will do, that will change the emulator that you're going to use for a large selection of ROMs and can cause issues with ones that are already set up correctly. So I recommend never changing the first one. The second one is ROM specific. So if you click on that, it will show you, it'll give you a list of all of the available emulators for that ROM. That doesn't mean that all of the emulators will work for that ROM, but chances are there's going to be a couple that will, and some work better than others. And depending on the type of game is depending on also how many emulators are available. For like MAME games, there's several different ones. For Final Burn Alpha, there's only a couple. And you'll see, like, for Nintendo, there's one or two and stuff like that. You can also go down and change the video resolution. So if something doesn't look right, or you want it to be bigger on the screen or smaller on the screen, you can go through and you can modify all that stuff too. I also only recommend doing that per ROM, like I also recommend only doing that like for the ROM and not for the entire collection, because you can cause other games that are working not to work right. So once you're done, you can just go down to launch. All right, once you're in a game, if you're in any of the arcade games, MAME games, Final Burn Alpha, those games, in order to coin up, you hit select. Coin up a couple times. Hit start. Also, depending on your game, sometimes the your A/B buttons might be, mapped a little weird. You can go in and change the configuration for every single game if you want. I just pretty much use the default and, just play a game or two and figure out, all right, this is the fire button, this is the jump button. Because they might be, for some games, they're mapped a little weird. But like I said, if you want to go through and you can change, if you want to change it, you can go through and change it for essentially every single game. And for some main games, you'll need to probably do that in order to get it to work right. Because most of the games all use the default controller configuration, but there are a few main games that just don't play well with that, and you'll need a USB keyboard. And as you start up the game, you can hit tab on the keyboard, and it will bring up the main configuration, and you can go through that and configure the controls and a lot of other stuff if you like. So in order to exit out of the game, hit select start. That'll take you back to the screen. If you don't know what Daphne is, that is the emulator for Laserdisc games. There's several Laserdisc games on here. All right, so the Daphne Laserdisc games, be a little patient with them loading. If the game hasn't been played, it has to go through and parse the files. Most of them, I'm pretty sure all of them have been parsed, but it takes a little bit longer for these to load up than it does other games, and they're just a little slower. So I'll just be patient with them. But I've went through and played Dragon's Lair and Space Ace and a couple other ones, and they play fine. You just have to get used to the controls. Also, once you have your RetroPie set up and you have it connected to your network, either by Wi-Fi or Ethernet, you can easily connect to it. You can use File Explorer in Windows. You can either use the IP, or you can just type in //RetroPie, and you'll see that there's a configuration folder, there's a ROMs folder. If you open up the ROMs folder, you'll see every single system, and then you'll see all of the ROMs for that system. If you want to add a ROM, you simply just drop it in that folder. If you want to add the artwork and the snap videos, you'll see inside each system folder there is a folder for snaps and wheel and marquee and artwork. That's where you'll put all of the files for each of the games. You'll want to make sure that everything is named exactly the same. If it's not, it won't match up. Also, if you want to make any changes to the display, you can either hit Tab on a keyboard if you have a USB keyboard connected, or I also have it mapped on the controller. If you do the left back, it brings up a configuration. This is where you can go in and you can set up the displays like you see on the wheel. You can, if you don't want to have all of the systems showing, you can go through and you can hide them. You can add new ones. You can go through and configure the controls. If you would like to add other hotkeys and stuff like that, you can go through and do it all in this stuff. This is where you can, do a lot of configuration in Attract Mode. But if you're not comfortable, I would not go in here and make a lot of changes, because you can easily mess stuff up and it might not look or work right. So that is pretty much it for the navigation and controls and stuff like that. So I would just say start playing away. You're going to find a lot of cool games that you never even knew existed. Every day I get in here and I find some game that I never heard of or never even seen before, and it's really fun. So enjoy and thanks.